Welcome to the first edition of Talking Shop. In this episode, we figured the perfect place to start was with Grant and Blockmates, since he's the reason we all followed suit and jumped into the Web3 industry ourselves. No doubt a bit of an odd one for us both, because it's not often you interview your mate and co-founder, but we discussed everything from Grant's early studies, how Blockmates came to be, and bizarrely why mothers from the northeast of England seem to love an inspirational quote hanging in the kitchen. I hope you enjoy, and as always, head to web3nomads.jobs to check us out. I believe that is us live, officially on the first Web3 Nomad Talking Shop podcast. Welcome to anyone listening, watching, whatever medium you're choosing to take in this content, and welcome Grant.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? I'm sick of talking to you.
It is, yeah. I think that to start from the top, what Grant and I thought we'd do for the very first series in Talking Shop is that we'd basically just have a chat between ourselves. It seemed that the best place to start would be to dig into the whole Blockmates story and how Grant ended up in this space, because Grant's the one that, let's be frank, got the rest of us into this mess. So I feel that it's probably wise to start there. What we want to do on this podcast is, as we get more guests on and people from different projects and backgrounds and freelance status, whatever it may be that people do and work within Web3, is we just want to basically bring people's stories to the forefront, because there's a hell of a lot of talk in this space about projects and tech, and that's obviously great, but what we want to focus on is how people ended up here, really, and why those stories are important, and ultimately why we feel that the more people that find their own journey will be better for the overall growth of the space in general. So I think that maybe we start with, from the outset, Grant, why don't we go from where you were before Blockmates, what you were doing, and how this thing all began?
Yeah, so I think if anyone's listened to any of the Blockmates content, they might have heard this before, but I think we'll be drawing in a completely different set of eyes on Web3 nomads anyway. So yeah, from the top, I always joke because I trained for an exceptionally long time at university to be a research scientist in cancer research, stem cells, and immunology, which is quite funny now because I could have went on to do something really productive. No, I joke. But no, I trained there at in Newcastle to go down that line of work. Really interested in kind of like the biotech sector. So left there, worked for a startup. Really enjoyed the. When you work in a startup, you wear kind of many hats, and it's kind of hilarious because you go in at the job interview and you apply for the job, and it's these will be your roles, and you get in, and it's just like complete chaos 24/7. You've got someone coming out of university who hasn't yet done like their masters, kind of overseeing like an extremely profitable biotech startup, and then it's like, do I go back and try and get the masters and go down PhD route, or do I kind of stick it out in the startup landscape? But I was quite young then and quite a little bit naive and didn't necessarily have like a fully formed business brain on top of my head. Some would argue I still don't have one resemblance of that now, but so I chose to go back and do my masters again, specialize in cancer research, again a bit of immunology and some stem cells in there as well. So, and there were kind of telltale signs that I just wasn't cut out for that life. Looking at kind of, because you're in a lab effectively, and you're in an institution with kind of professors and doctors of all walks of life, and then but you're also in with PhD students who are effectively going through the residency to get their kind of doctorate. And I was kind of seeing those. If I had to come in over a weekend and I had to, like, I don't know, feed my cells or something like that, you'd kind of see sleeping bags and stuff like that on the floor. And I was like, no way, I'm not, I'm not going down a PhD route. I was like, absolutely not. I enjoy going out and watching football with my mates and like having way too many beers. So that can't be my life. I can't be sleeping in the lab. No way.
Wow.
So immediately I was like, I'm not going to go down the academic route. What also do I like? And I was probably romanticizing it a little bit, but thinking I kind of like the more business aspect of it. So we went in to, well, at first I went working for like a huge pharmaceutical company. And what I quickly learned there is I don't necessarily work well with big groups of people. I quite like being in small nimble teams. And then it was progressed into biotech sales, so like really high capital sales, effectively during the time where COVID hit. So if you can think about it as the big bioreactors or the big fermentation vessels that people would grow the pharmaceuticals up in, that's what I was trying to shill on to people. I kind of liked it, but I kind of think I only liked it because the perks and the benefits and the nice car were great. I didn't necessarily believe in the kind of products I was selling, and I didn't also like being, felt like you were kind of choreographed in certain meetings and things like that, and kind of a like high level overview of that whole time in like my early career was just, I figured out quite quickly I didn't like working in big teams, didn't necessarily like being told what to do very much. And I also didn't like the kind of, you'd put on a different face to go into work every day, and it made me kind of die inside a little bit, which is so quickly it was like the sensible thing to do would be go and do something that you really enjoy, but then you've got the kind of financial aspect of that where it's like you can't just go from like a really cushy job and immediately just tell them that you're just gonna go and start a website. It just doesn't make any sense. But effectively, as I was saying, because that was during kind of COVID times, it was me and my girlfriend, we'd always knew we wanted to kind of travel. And it was really difficult planning because it was like, do we try and stick and wait this thing out? Because obviously borders weren't open during that time, or do we take a leap effectively and just take a big gamble? Because there were a couple of countries that did allow people in with like a ridiculously long quarantine, but it's like everyone was just looking at us as if we were complete idiots. It's like, what, you're going to go traveling in the midst of a pandemic and leave your job that you've spent like £80,000 on at university? I was like, I'm
going to do it.
They're like, how are you gonna fund it? I was like, well, got a little bit of savings, but looking back now at what we had, there was nowhere near enough in the bank effectively. And at the time I'd been probably like towards the six months towards the end of like the biotech job. It was, I was kind of leaning towards the things that I really enjoyed most, and that was kind of writing and getting involved in the whole cryptocurrency and Web3 space. I'd always been involved in it, but the more I began to kind of write and the more I began to kind of delve into it, it was like, this is something that doesn't necessarily feel like a task, even though I was staying up till like 1 or 2 in the morning, kind of writing articles just off my own back, completely for free, didn't want anything from it. And I also remember a few of our close friends just saying like, what is the end goal here? Like, why are you doing this?
It's funny. Sorry, man, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's funny to think where we're at now, and even like having this conversation on the podcast now about the way it is and like where Blockmates is like what it's grown into, and even like bleeding into the Web3 nomads thing. But like from the very early days when we would like just share Blockmates on Instagram, and it would be like, check out our mate doing this, he's writing. And I remember like sharing it at the time and not even fully understanding what you were doing. I was just like, oh yeah, I saw it. Mike had posted it, and I was like, yeah, go and read Blockmates, like it'll get you involved. But I don't
even think I knew what I was doing at the time, to be honest.
I think one thing we've actually like missed there in the entire story even though we got like the great backstory about like what you were doing and the industry you were working in and why it quite wasn't the right fit and everything, but where did it actually begin with crypto, Web3, whatever you want to call it? Because even before Blockmates was the seed of an idea, like where did you kind of come across the space and kind of think, right, this is interesting, you know, like what was that point?
Yeah, that's also quite another funny story to be quite frankly honest. So, going back to kind of university, and obviously nobody has two pennies to scratch together. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all at that time, again, I've always been quite like industrious. Like the first kind of business I had was probably like 9 or 10 year old, and I was going to like the local BMX shop, and I knew he had. This is hilarious. I can't believe it. I knew he had like bike magazines from like for all these different kind of bike companies, and the school I went to, there was quite a lot of people that were really, really into like BMXing.
Right.
But those magazines were free, and I'd take them into school and like put like a quid on them or something like that. And everyone was over the moon because they got the posters out with them. And then, so like I was all like, even from a very, very young age, I was trying to. It's like Blockmates has been like a 20-year overnight success. Effectively, it's always just been trying to grind something out. And so effectively, I was at university and I kept hearing people speak of like Bitcoin for less than savory reasons, because it was one of the payment infrastructures for the Silk Road at the time. But and then it kind of really took off like 2017, and it was getting close to kind of Christmas time, and probably tried to be too clever for my own good and didn't understand what I was necessarily doing, and looked at the likes of XRP and just basically just looked at it and thought, well, that's a cheap price, because it was like
the trap.
$3 or something, not understanding how kind of valuation and market cap works, and like circulating supply and all that kind of jazz. And I was like, well, if that hits Bitcoin's price, I'm going to be rich. So I thought I'd conquered the market and didn't realize what everyone was complaining about. I was like, this is easy. Like, why do people get paid so much for this? So successfully bought the like XRP top in 2017, 2018.
Nice.
But that money was supposed to last me like for the rest of my studies, effectively. So it was like, well, what are you going to do now? One, you're going to have to go and get an actual real job and dig your way out of this financial mess you've made. But you can also kind of, at the same time, you can also figure out where you went wrong, what you did, and try to learn about the industry. So the next time it comes around, you're not buying like one of the worst projects on the market, effectively. So that's how it kind of came about. And then obviously we went sideways for an awful lot of time after that.
Yeah.
And the only thing that kind of kept me interested was Chainlink came onto the market, and that was like the darling child of that sideways kind of bear market. And I always say, and I've said this a million times, it's if that project didn't come out the gates as strong as it did, there's no way I'd be doing this now, because it was the only thing that kind of kept my eye on the industry effectively, and that was enough to kind of see me through that transitionary period that was really, really dull and boring. Funnily enough, the guy who was actually tweeting about it that piqued mine and Mike's interest, he fell off the face of the earth for like 2.5 years. And he actually came back onto Twitter the other day, so I messaged him, basically just saying, if you weren't a person, there's no way I'd be doing any of this now, which is quite strange, really. It's just fate, really, I think.
Yeah. It's funny, like, and I'm not going to, digress on talking about one particular token or whatever, but Chainlink is always the one for me as well, which I suppose that was the feed from you down through us all. That Mike, after 4 or 5 pints, would just be chewing my ear off about, read about this Chainlink, Al. Not going to like impersonate one of the other co-founders on the podcast there, but that was like almost the gateway drug as well, wasn't it? And it's funny how like you were the dealer to us all. now we are where we are.
Kind of mental, but yeah, I mean, I'm talking here as if anyone who listens knows what blocmates is. It's so basically like high level. I always try and take the opposite side of the most obvious play effectively. So 99% of people, even people that are within the industry, still don't have the first understanding of how it all works. And I suppose this comes back to probably where I've got PTSD from that first kind of XRP buy. It's like you need to get down like to first principles of how all these projects, protocols, the economics and things like that behind them work. But anyone can kind of write that in a really high level way. And project founders and projects tend to write their documentation in a way that's littered with jargon, and it's just like too high barrier to entry for like the average market participant effectively. So I was
as well.
Exactly. So it was like, well, let's have a look at the remaining 99% of people who don't have a clue what's going on, and let's try and write content for them. So I think we've trained to be kind of writing academic papers and things like that. You can still approach it with that level of detail, but there's no way on earth you should kind of exclude people by writing in such like a highbrow way, if that makes sense. So it was always trying to keep in mind just to keep it really lighthearted, keep the jargon to a minimum, keep everything as low barrier to entry and low friction as possible. And what tended to happen there was kind of projects looked at it and thought, well, we could do with some of this. So and kind of the kind of brand and everything developed from there. So it's again just like more of an education platform. Like the tagline's effectively creating Web3 content that your dad could understand effectively.
Yeah,
so
that's the line, isn't it? And it almost like the business plan accidentally fell into place. Well, we're still working on that business plan today.
Yeah, it's an ever changing one that. But yeah, it's been great ever since. It's we've got good kind of connections in the industry, and we've tried to be respectful of kind of the readership. There's a really big issue with the kind of content creation space in the industry, and I don't need to go into the kind of the dark arts of how all that works, but we're very aware of that, and we just try to completely flip it on its head at every opportunity, I think.
Yeah, and again, not to we probably jumping back and forth across topics here, but I guess that's the nature of the two of us just completely freestyling it. But if we jump back to what we were saying about how you and your then girlfriend, now fiance, were heading off to go traveling, and Blockmates was kind of very much in its infancy at that point. How do you think that led to the position that you're in now? And I will get to the overall point that I'm getting at, but do you think that having that kind of engagement and knowing that you were enjoying what you were doing and felt like you had that freedom allowed like a better standard of work to come through as far as Blockmates was concerned?
Yeah, it's exactly like, it's the complete opposite of not wanting to get up on a Monday and go to work. It's like, it was even in the early days, it was like I didn't mind sitting down and writing for like 5 or 6 days straight and really get into like the nuts and bolts of what a project was. And it was also at the time where I was kind of learning to properly write myself, so it was like an enjoyable task. But I think what it was because when you enjoy something as much, it doesn't necessarily feel like work, so it's a lot easier to kind of get into a healthy habit of consistency. And that's, if we look back at like the traditional kind of line of work I was in, that Monday morning fear was basically there every Sunday night effectively.
Yeah.
It didn't help if I had way too many beers on the Saturday because you're a bit
hungover.
All the Sunday, but it was like, oh, do I really have to go? So that played into it an awful lot, and doing something like, there's that 10,000 hours theory in Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, isn't there? But I don't think I'd have tapped over 10,000 hours just yet. But you just end up becoming kind of not a blow their own horn, but like the subject matter expert in the field.
Yeah,
through consistency.
it's cliche, isn't it, to kind of to say, and I've no doubt that people listening to this would be like massive eye rolling when you say that it's so much easier to get out of bed every day when you enjoy what you're doing. And it's funny to kind of look at your, I was going to say story there and realize how like Bellendish that would have sounded, but your path and mine in parallel, because me, for example, like straight out the gates at uni, I essentially landed like a dream job working in professional sport. I was out in Marbella on pre-season, my second week in the job, and it was just absolutely unbelievable. I was like interviewing Bob Mortimer and my heroes and watching my football team like basically conquer all, make it to the Premier League, and then, but equally, like I realized that I was doing almost like I felt like too much. Like I felt like because it never felt like work. I could definitely see that my own life was like being pulled in that direction that I didn't really want it to, and I wanted to kind of realign with like work-life balance. And I obviously went traveling too, but I'm not going to go down that route here. But like I think what's important is now where I am in Web3, the skills that I learned in my first role in football are the ones that are like most prevalent and the most useful in this space. And like they're the ones that I would probably think I'm the best at. And I think the reason I'm the best at that level of skill is because I enjoyed it so much. I think like that's kind of, tell me if I'm wrong, what you're saying now with blockmates, that what you've got is a situation where you've become so good at it just because you genuinely just enjoy it so much day in, day out.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And it's the whole motivation behind it is just it's not even a thought. It's pretty difficult because like motivation's difficult to maintain. Like everyone can watch a quick kind of inspirational video on Instagram or whatever people use these days, and you're like, right, I'm gonna go and lift like 1,000-kilo dumbbells. But like if those videos wear off quite quickly, so it's like building the habits in through kind of lines of work and areas that you consistently enjoy, that you don't actually need like a stupid motivational quote that your mum puts in the kitchen, like when life gives you lemons, make gin and tonic or something.
Mate, my mum has so many of those hanging around the kitchen. Is it a Teesside thing or a northeast thing? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe like that's just what like mothers of our generation like. But I think that again, like pulling it back around, kind of almost lost my train of thought ever so slightly there, but pulling it back around to like working on something that you're kind of passionate about, and for you, it's a no-brainer that you know, you love working in this space and you very much found your niche. But like, if people were listening to this and they were really interested in your story and how you made the transition into Web3 and crypto, aside from all the investing and whatnot aside, and you were solely looking at, right, I'm going to consider a role in this industry. Like, what do you think? I guess first of all, what do you think the pitfalls to it are? Because I would prefer to start with like the watch outs, and then what is it about this space that you love so much as well? More importantly, like what advice would you give?
Yeah, so I think, well, like everyone's almost certainly going to be different. That kind of goes without saying. But for me personally, if you can kind of think back to the beginning of the conversation, and the traditional areas of work that I didn't necessarily like or didn't kind of resonate with, or just thought were a little too kind of tried, tested, and extremely dated. I'll start with what I like and I'll go on what I don't like. Sorry.
Go on, then.
So the pit, like those areas, as I was saying, I didn't necessarily like in my traditional line of work, were kind of everything was really regimented. Everything was, you know, by the book. Everything was a little bit too kind of choreographed and a little bit inauthentic. And don't get me wrong, you do get that in this space as well. But the beauty of what I'd love more than anything in this space, and it helps when we've run in a community of like 5,000 people in our Discord. It's just everyone's just so down to earth, and you don't necessarily. Sometimes you're going to be working 8 to 12 hours a day with some people you don't necessarily like, and you're spending more time with them than you are with your family. And what I found in this space is everyone's here for like a small select number of reasons, and in doing that, it's kind of liken it to those who went out west to kind of dig for gold in the 1700s or 1800s, whenever that was. And everyone's extremely like-minded. Everyone's extremely open-minded. You kind of have to be, because there's a couple of reasons you come into this space. One, it's for like a philosophical standpoint of like an open financial system. Two, it's for profit, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's an emergent kind of technology, and there's always going to be people that come in to innovate to kind of make money and things like that. So there is a kind of crossover there. So you're kind of in a boat with people that they're all pushing for the same couple of reasons, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
And again, I've said this previously, like, and not to kind of shit on people who do this, but I've said, like, in the past that we've only worked with 2 projects that we've had an issue with, and that's kind of mental, because we've worked with so many projects over the past like 2 years, and you kind of see them come in with this kind of really rigid, kind of static attitude. This has to be done. This has to be done at this point. This has to be done under these circumstances. 9 times out of 10, if you're working with someone in the Web3 space, or you're working with a project, or you're working on a project with someone, everyone just trusts everyone to get along with it.
Yeah.
And what's kind of amazing about it is you see billion-dollar projects, billion-dollar companies spun up out of like a Discord. And if that was a kind of traditionally bred company that's all worked in an office, they all came in at 8 or they all came in at 9, they all wore like business formal attire, they all had to do this, they all had these meetings at 9 o'clock and things like that, just how you should run a business, kind of, so to speak. There's no way they'd be able to move as fast as people that are moving in this space, and that's why the space moves at the rapid rate that it does, and that's why there's so much innovation, so much opportunity, in my opinion. And people are just generally more happy and relaxed. I know that's kind of a really overarching statement. And one thing I will say, and not to kind of like shill this too much, is I don't know anyone who comes in to work in the Web3 space that says it's not for me and goes back. Once they kind of get the kind of freedom, the allowance to kind of do something, the trust to kind of. There's another thing with what I found with like a traditional workspace is if you're coming in like a early or entry level job and you don't necessarily have a large amount of experience, but they've obviously seen something, and you don't necessarily kind of get trusted to go and do something that's like exceptional or big, or like you don't get to kind of go out of your lane, so to speak. I know kind of 19-year-old founders that have effectively at the height of like a bull market that have went on to like raise like $500 million valuation. 19-year-olds, and that's because they've had the onus to just go and create something, and people have rallied around them, and no one's kind of had preconceptions of they're just a kid that can't do stuff like this. It's just flipping everything I kind of hate about that world on its head, and that's what I love so much about it, I suppose.
I think you're right, to be honest. I think that the one thing that I've found as well, and again, it's probably the second time I say it, almost sounds cliche, but like everyone that I've come across, certainly so far in the space, is just really supportive of each other, which is what's strange about that is, from the outside looking in, the industry has a reputation of probably the exact opposite. I mean, bloody hell, look at that latest Netflix documentary, Don't Trust Anyone, they called it. I mean, it's just, this industry is subject to the worst kind of negative clickbait of any, probably, that I've experienced. And the reality of it is, from the inside, it couldn't be further from that, which I guess can only be a good thing. You know, I agree completely with everything you've said, really.
Yeah, you're completely right in what you're saying now, because it's kind of a funny one, because as soon as anyone starts talking, well, if we kind of separate it out from like crypto, kind of permissionless finance, Web3, because I suppose Web3 is a little bit more all-encompassing of all those kind of niches within the industry. But people begin to talk about crypto when, one, we're at the peak of a bull market and everyone begins to buy and loses an awful lot of money because they haven't paid attention. They don't understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Some friend at work said, "Oh, I've just bought this. It's going up 10x."
Yeah.
They end up going in unsophisticated, don't know what they're doing, and just doing what I did in 2017, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly what happens, and that's why it's in the news. And Elon Musk starts tweeting about it or something like that. But what I did an awful lot of in the early days, which definitely doesn't scale, and I almost certainly couldn't do it now, I just don't have the time, is I'd literally post a Calendly on the bottom of each blog, and just allow people to book like slots in, and I'd take them through it start to finish for free, like just completely off my own back. And everyone was like, "You're insane," and I was like, "Yep, I know." But 100% of the time, people walked away and were just like blown away. Like whether it was an interest on kind of stable coins that were far and away better than what they were ever going to get in a bank, the idea of kind of self-custody and owning everything in your own wallet, showing people kind of yield opportunities, lending and borrowing protocols. Anyone can get a loan anywhere in the world at like in an instant, and just showing them what's actually being built as opposed to showing them kind of news headlines effectively. And as I say, 100% of people, once they've been down the rabbit hole, it's like that they don't come back out, and it's always for the right reasons. So
I think you'll get the initial shock. Don't get me wrong. Don't you? Like the absolute madness, and then when you see how fun and hilarious it is, I think that's actually a really great point, and it's probably a really good point to end on as well, man. To be honest, like once you're down the rabbit hole, you're not getting back out. that's the takeaway from the first Web3 Nomads podcast, anyway.
Yeah, great. Well, we'll probably have any, like, basically by the time the website comes out, any of the interesting jobs or any interesting projects that are that we'll be hosting on the website, we'll do our best to get those guys on. And it's just, we're going to be digging into, again, getting their perspective on it, like what their story was, why they want to work in there, why they'd probably never go back to working in a traditional workspace. We've seen, I mean, speaking to one yesterday, I won't kind of highlight who it was, but they were basically chief marketing officer for one of the top 5 traded companies on the planet, and now they've went to work with one of the most innovative and rising projects in the whole crypto space. So there is an exodus of people who are sick and tired of the traditional work, and we're going to try and highlight that again, show the pros, show the cons, but hopefully it's just a podcast where people can realize that if an idiot like me can kind of use some of them minimal skills that they had, that there are opportunities for anyone, and it's not a big bad scary space. If people need to learn a little bit more, they can go to the blocmates.com website and learn all about it. It's what the beautiful synergy is between the two projects, I suppose. And yeah, so stay tuned.
It's a great ending, man.
All right, over and out.